Hey guys, so in the previous video, this is where we had left off with, where if ever you click on any of the squares, you get a background of gray, X appears in the middle of the square, and this works for all of the squares. Now we are going to finish off the coding part in this video so that we have a proper game running where you have alternating players of XO, and also it determines the winner using the basic logic of the game. So without any further ado, let's jump into the video and see how to code our Tic Tac Toe game. So this is what I'm going to be starting off with. Basically, you need something which can store the value inputted here, whether it's X or O. That's what I'm going to first work on. So basically, I'm going to go to this board and create a constructor out here. Like for the square, we created a constructor. So let's create for this too. So we do same thing, constructor. It will take in the props. And this will also have super of props. And this dot state. And this is what is going to help us store the value of the inputted text. Remember that this props and this props both have to be at the same spelling. Like out here, we had stored the value, either it's X or O. And similarly for the board, we're going to store a value for all of them. So we're going to create an array called a square. And this array is going to have 9 spaces. And we're going to fill them with null for now because we have not determined what's going to go inside each of them in the start. So that's what we're going to do. So we call it square. And then this is an array length of 9. And this array is going to be filled with null. Okay, that's easy to understand and pretty simple. Now, once this is done, let's say you save it, you refresh this. Okay, now what is going to happen is, if you, let's say you have this as 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's going to be the array. If you click in X here, it's going to say X, null, 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 null. So another X out here. So X, null, 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 X, null, 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 and null. So that's how it's going to be stored. Now next, we are going to be working with this render square function. Basically, we haven't actually used this value which we input here, the props value. So instead of this value, which is just an I, what we're going to say is input this square, because it should know, right? If it's previously whatever is inputted here in place of X, whatever is input there is what is going to be shown in the square. Okay, this is the value it's going to contain. So that's what we're going to do out here. And we'll say this, go to the super class, which is the constructor. And we access the state of the constructor, go to the squares function and take the I, whichever I the user is. Like with 0, take the 0th position of the square array. That's what the render square function is. Now this render square function is going to have an on click to it. So on the click of that, what we wanted to do is basically, so on the click of that square, let's say, what we wanted to do is display an X or O based on the player. So that's what we're going to create, and that we are going to create by using a function called as handle click. So this will be an arrow function. So for an arrow function, how you go ahead is you put curly braces in round brackets, close it off, and then we call this dot handle click. And let's go ahead and let's create that function where it will handle the click. Like when you click on it, it stores the value, whether it's X or Y, X or 0, and puts it in the square. Because we want the square to store the value so that we can determine the winner based on that. So now let's go ahead and let's write the handle click function. So it's a simple function. We'll just call it handle click. Take an argument of I. And what we'll have is, first let's create another array. We'll call this also a square. We just call the squares actually. This is square and this will be squares. So this, which you have the squares out here, will be just a copy of this square as a whole. So for that, we use the JavaScript function called a slice. So we go this dot state dot square dot slice. And if you don't give any argument inside the slice, it just means that you're going to copy the square, the array as a whole, into another array called as squares. That's what this is. And now inside the squares, when you click on it, for now, we'll just say the I to be storing X. Okay. Now once this is done, we have to set the state. Basically this square has to be reset to this place. So first we copied from this square to this squares S. Now we have to copy from this squares to the singular square, basically backwards now, because we have the stored value, right? So we have to update the array. So for that, what he says, this dot set state, and in the brackets you say square, set it to what squares was. That's what we wanted to do. I hope everyone got what is happening here. We have just set whatever the square is, we just set it to there. That's why I put the difference in the words. I just added an S there. Now once this is done, we have to implement all of this, basically the handle click, the render, and we have to make the on click function work. So for that, what we got to do is we have to go to the square class which we have already created, and in the render, in place of on click, and it just what it does is just sets the value to X. We're going to change that a bit. So we're going to remove this constructor. We don't need the constructor anymore. And in the on click function, we'll change it to basically when you click on it, it should start this on click. So that's what we're going to be doing out here. So this dot, it should go to the previous place. So that's what props is for. And it should trigger this particular on click. So let's trigger the on click, which you already have. And that's a function. On click is a function, right? It's an arrow function. And you no more have the state. What it should show is props, basically what you have already stored in the place before. Okay, now this is basically just like creating an array, and upon clicking that button, the X gets displayed over there, and you also have an array which will have an X stored in that place. So now it's just basic X happening here, right? But a Tic Tac Toe has an X and a O to it. So let's add the O to it. So for that, what we are going to use is we're going to use a Boolean value, a true or false value, which determines that if X is what is supposed to be coming up next. So if we know if X is coming up next, based on that, we will change the values. Like for example, we'll change the value over here, and we'll change the value over here as next player. So we're going to create a variable here called as X is next. And for now, we'll set it to true, because when you start off your game, X is the first player who's going to start. So we'll set it to true for now. And then the handle click this square. What we want it to do is first we have to check if X is next is true. If that is the case, then the squares of I should be put to X, or else we put it to O. So for that, we have to access the X is next. So how we do that is you do this dot state dot X is next, and we are using the question mark way of if and else. If it's true, then you go for an X. If it's false, then you go for an O. And once that is done, we want to set the state, like squares is set. We have to set the state for one more thing, basically. The X is next has to be changed to false after that, right? Or whatever was not the opposite of what it was earlier. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to set X is next to false of this dot state dot X is next. Hopefully align this code. Yep. So what we are doing out here is basically just that, like if it's true, the next time it should change to false. If it's false, the next time it should change it to true. That's what we're doing with this statement. And the exclamation means negation of what is happening. That's one thing which is done. And next is the status. So for now, we'll just remove this and we'll add a function where we do the if statement again. This dot state dot X is next, right? Now that if it's true, it should be X, and if it's false, it should be set to, and then the rest remains the same. Now let me save this and let's refresh the page. Okay. Yeah, I found the error. So the mistake I did was I added an S out here, which is not present here. So we are just basically accessing this square, right? So the extra S was the mistake. So you save it and you can refresh it and you can see. So now how it will work is, let me show you. X here, it changes to O, and then now you'll have O and the next pair is X. So O, X, O, okay, it just keeps on going. So now what we're going to be looking at next is how to like declare the winner. So that's what we're going to be writing, a separate function for that. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll write a function here. We'll call this function and we'll call this calculate winner. And this will take in squares, basically. So what are the ways you can determine the winner? It can be a 0, 1, 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or you can say 0, 3, 6, 1, 4, 7 or 2, 5, 8. You can say 0, 4, 8 or you can say 2, 4, 6. So these are the ways you can determine the winner. Basically, both the vertical, horizontal and the diagonal ways. So now we'll create an array called as constant lines, which is basically the ways you can determine the winner. And this will be a two-dimensional array. So it will be 0, 1, 2, which is one way. Next way is 3, 4, 5, the other way. Next way is 6, 7, 8. Now these are the horizontal ways. Next we go to the vertical ways. The vertical ways is 0, 3, 6. Next would be 1, 4, 7. And next would be 2, 5, 8. These are the vertical ways. Now let's go to the diagonal ways, which will be 0, 4, 8. That will be this way. And next, the last one will be this way, which is 2, 4, 6. So 2, 4, 6. Okay, now these are the lines which we wanted to create, and we have created them. Now let's write a for loop where we will check if the winner is declared based on the elements present. So we write a for loop, and the for loop, let's declare a variable called I, and we'll put that I less than lines dot length, and next we'll declare I++. So we'll increment it every time. And then now let's declare a constant called A, B, C, and this will basically be lines of I. Okay. Now so the if statement is going to be in such a way that first we'll check if A is present, and if it's present, is it equal to B and is it equal to C. So first we'll do is we'll check if A is present. That will be squares of A, and this squares is same as this squares, and it will check the A present there, if it's X or O, and if it's present, we'll check it if it's equal to B or B and C. So squares of A being equal to, just triple equal to. In JavaScript, we have two types of equal to, the double equal to and triple equal to, and the triple equal to checks for type 2, unlike the double equal to. And then we'll check if it's equal to squares of C2. So squares of A being equal to squares of C. So by this we can say that A is present and it's equal to both B and C. And once we have determined that, we will return the squares. Yeah, we'll return the squares of A. And if we get nothing, then we return none. Now we'll use the calculate winner function. So where we'll use this calculate winner is, first of all, we'll use it for the status. Let's determine a const called as winner, and this one will use the calculate winner function, and it will give this dot state dot square. And we'll also determine a variable called status, and this one will be changing basically. Both are the same, the status of there and this const. But if, let's say, the winner is true, that means we get a variable out of it, then we have to set the status, right? We have to change the status. So status is equal to winner, and the winner will be determined by the variable we get out, whether it's X or O. So we'll just add it to the sentence, winner. And let's say we don't. Then what we do? We put the status, right? We say the next player is still left out, right? It's still not over. We still have somebody to play. So the code is almost done. Now let me refresh it. Now let me go and play by myself itself. So we'll put X here, O here, X here. We'll just leave this out for now. Put an O here, X, so we get a winner. Although you can go ahead and input variables, but this will not be changing. It will just set to winner is X. Now we'll add another button. So instead of just going there and refreshing so that you get this new page, cleaned out page, let's add a button out here which brings out a new board by itself. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function and we'll call that as reload board, or we'll call it as a new board. And this function is going to use the reload function which is there in every web page. So what we do is window dot location dot reload, and we'll check that to false. Okay, now let's use this new board function where we'll go ahead, we'll say div, and inside that, okay, we can't create two divs, sorry, I forgot that. We'll create a div here, and inside this div we'll create a button, and this button will say refresh or create new board. Let's say create new board, and here we'll create a on click, and on the click of that you have to call this function of new board. How we do that is in JavaScript to call a variable. So we do that is similarly what we do here. You say new board, so you refresh it. Okay, there was a problem here as expected. I had to put parenthesis. It's a mistake. Okay, you have create new board. You can actually increase the size of it. Go to the CSS and let's do it here. We'll say button and we'll set the font size to be like around 5 rem. So we have it. Actually, let's reduce it and we'll give it as 3 rem, and we'll give margin of 2 rem. So it spaces out itself from the rest. Oh, jeez. Everything is a button, right? I forgot that. We have to actually create a separate class out here. It's a mistake. Class, and we'll call this as refresh page. Refresh. And let's go here, and instead of button, we'll just call this as refresh. You save it and you reload this. Okay, now it's here. Now let me do it. X, we have O, and O here. We'll give an X here, give an O here, give an X here, give an O here. The winner is declared. Create new board. We'll click and we'll refresh the page and start with to player X. So that's it. We are done with the coding. This is a pretty short one. You saw how you can create this whole thing. Now in the next video, we'll see how to deploy it to the open web, and that's going to be a pretty short video. So that's it from me in this video. Let's see you guys in the next video.